Hey everybody, we're going to take a look at the next video regarding this area, which is called the invisible central sun, which is actually the Orion Nebula Trapezium area where that pinch actually occurs. You can see the Birkeland currents that lead up to M42 or the Orion Nebula, and the pinch that occurs is actually located somewhere in between those trapezium stars. Now, if you haven't looked at the other previous videos, I highly recommend that you do that because it kind of leads up to all this, and there's so much information I can't make it all comprehensive. We're going to take a look at, though, there's this thing that the ancients knew a long time ago. There was a similarity between what we see in man and what we actually see in the cosmos. Not just in theory, but also in form as well. Because we can see that this area that they're talking about right here, which is Kether, this area, is spoken of as the brain which sits behind our visible sun. The sun is the heart of the solar world system, and its brain is hidden behind the visible sun. From thence sensation is radiated into every nerve center of the great body. Now here's what we've learned about all this so far, in case you guys haven't seen the previous videos. What we've learned is that there is highly scientific information that can be extracted from these ancient texts. What's happened is these ancient texts describe things in a slightly different manner. And because of what these religions have done over time and the control that's behind a lot of them, people have a bad taste in their mouth about religious texts because they think that these religious texts are all about control. And that's not true. It's the people that are behind these texts that are about control. Mostly, I would say coming from the Roman Catholic Church, because we don't see this kind of stuff from really anybody else. We don't see a control system coming from the Kabbalah, coming from the Buddhist texts, coming from these other things. It all seems to stem from, mostly, what I'm seeing is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has put themselves in between us and what we might call God, making themselves the authority figure. And so what's happened is all of these texts that have come from the Bible and so forth, the Catholic Church is taking it on themselves to interpret it the way they want you to understand it, and at the same time has told everybody not to look at anything else. So what that of course does is it allows them to control the interpretation of these texts completely. And what they have done is they have misinterpreted many of these things on purpose. Because when you go out and you start looking at the other text, you see, oh, well, this is very similar to what I saw in the Bible, but they interpreted it differently over here. And then you go look at something else and you see the same kind of thing. And after about 4 or 5 times of that, you start going, okay, now what's going on? Somebody interpreted the Bible incorrectly the first time. Because all these other things over here are saying something similar, and what's standing out like a sore thumb is this interpretation over here in the Bible. So that's what's basically happened. And so that's why you see things like Kabbalah completely demonized by the church. You see things like all these other various texts, and what the common thing you see is stay away from the book of Enoch, or stay away from the book of Kabbalah, or stay away, and you kind of see that thing all over the place. Well, that's basically the church talking in the background. They don't want you to know what's really going on. But what we've seen is, Blavatsky's been totally demonized. The Freemasons have been totally demonized. All these people that are bringing us this information that we see that's actually in sync with what we're now seeing with the electric universe, all these people that have been bringing us the real truth, they've all been demonized. I hope that becomes very clear for a lot of people. Because when we start seeing science matching up to what we're seeing here in these ancient texts, the text that we're all told to stay away from by the church, when that starts happening, it raises a whole new level of awareness. I hope it does anyway. I hope you're beginning to realize who's been lying to you for such a long time. A lot of it comes from the church. So, with that being said, and that's one of the reasons why I stuck with Blavatsky, I stuck with Manly Hall. I understand the Freemasons, I understand the symbolism behind it. And like I've mentioned earlier in a previous video, they try to scare you away from symbolism too. Everything is evil, right? They want you to think everything is evil. That's the whole reason why they have made everybody they've tried to make everybody afraid of this whole pyramid with the eye, which basically is a structure of the cosmos in a very simple sense. The eye being this area that you see right here, and the pyramid leading down, which is the rest of the cosmos, down to what we see down here. It's a symbol that is a structure of the cosmos, our solar world system. And this area right here, where the missing capstone is, represents the central spiritual invisible sun, what the Egyptians were trying to point us to. There's a reason why they put the pyramids where they did, right next to the Nile Delta, but we're not going to go into that in this particular video. But I'd be interested in talking to somebody that knows the electrical nature of things regarding some very interesting things that have been discovered there. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Kabbalah in a little bit more detail here, and the descriptions that are described. And with this new perspective, with the electric universe perspective in your head, it should become a little bit more clear now about what we're dealing with and what they were talking about in these ancient texts. They're describing our central sun, which is the Orion Nebula Trapezium. Okay, so I've got a clip that I have played you before, probably several times. But now, when I play it for you, you're going to understand a little bit more, because now you're going to visualize the electric universe in your head. And I want you to visualize this area, which is called Macroprosopis, which is also referred to as Kether. And this is a Manly Hall clip. And I'm going to pause it here in a few places, and I'm going to show you the links that back these things up so that you know we're talking about the same thing. And then we'll listen to what he has to say about it, and you'll see that he's talking about the exact same thing. And then we're going to take a look at the texts inside what we see here, which is the Macroprosopis right here, which is interpreted in 1912. And we're going to take a look at some of these areas right here. This is regarding the Greater Holy Assembly, and if you notice, it's speaking of Macroprosopis, okay? And you'll notice that it's speaking of the brain and the hair and the forehead and the eyes and these different things, but it's mostly speaking of the brain, the ancient one, or Macroprosopis, okay? So, let's listen to what Manly Hall has to say here real quick. I'm going to pause here a couple of times throughout this thing, and we're just going to back some things up, and then we're going to take a look at the texts.
In the Jewish mysticism, the development of the great concept resulted also in a secondary God form. This secondary God form was called Macroprosopis.
Okay, so we know he's talking about Macroprosopis now. He's going to follow that with some descriptions. Well, let's take a look. What does the Kabbalah say about Macroprosopis? And I have it right here. So if we scroll all the way down, we can see that this, like Macroprosopis, is a title of Kether, the first Sephirah. Okay, so this area right here, if you see it says Kether, okay, this is the crown, and it's referring to the Macroprosopis. And if you notice here on the right, I have the Orion Nebula. You notice right here, this is taken from St. Joseph's Cathedral. It shows a sun, and the sun, and you see this pyramid, and the pyramid has the air shafts that also match the same angles of the air shaft in the pyramids. And you see him with his head right here, and this actually leads right down into the pineal gland area. Okay, so this area right here represents Kether, and this is the human body equivalent of it right here. Just one more place from William G. Gray in The Ladder of Lights in 1975. He did this Kabbalah text called The Ladder of Lights. You see Kether, and he refers to it as the nebula, and he refers to it as the apex. Kether not only signifies a crown in the regal sense, but also the summit of any height, especially a mountain or a pillar. And that is what is being referred to. He's referring to it as the nebula. Macroprosopis is referred to as Kether, and Kether is this area up here, so it's the height, it's the summit. So now we can clearly see that it's referring to the nebula and referring to the very top of the tree. Now let's listen to what Manly Hall has to say about this.
Or the long face. The Macroprosopis represented the revelation of deity in the creation process. And there emerged out of the mystery of infinite being the gigantic figure, like the giant of the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, a mysterious and colossal figure, with one foot upon the oceans and the other upon the land, around whose body the stars and planets moved, and whose face was always in profile.
Okay, so he says, around whose body the stars and planets moved, and whose face was always in profile. Okay, so that's really important. Let's take a look at why. Michelangelo gave us this in his painting called The Creation of Adam. Adam, the first Adam in the Bible, is really what you see in the cloud up here. Now we can see that what he actually painted the Orion Nebula. We can see the detail that's contained inside the overlay. How these guys did this, how they knew the intimate details of this, I have no idea. But even beyond that, how these images actually ended up in the nebula to begin with is also very interesting. But what is clear is that he painted the Orion Nebula, and he actually painted a brain in profile. So he painted this figure in profile, and that's exactly what Manly Hall just said. Let's listen to that again.
Figure, with one foot upon the oceans and the other upon the land, around whose body the stars and planets moved, and whose face was always in profile.
So, what they're actually speaking of, Macroprosopus, which is Kether, which is the nebula, they're saying that this area, whose face was always in profile. And that is what we see right here when we take a look at the nebula. So he's speaking of this area right here, which is also backed up by the ladder of lights. Now, his face was always in profile, but why?
Because deity was represented always with one eye.
Well, the one eye that he's actually referring to is he's referring to the eye of Kether, and that is the same as the eye of Osiris, and that triangle that you see right there, where the pinch actually exists inside those trapezium stars, this triangular area right here is the eye that he is speaking of. And if we take a look, the eye that he's speaking of is actually in the same area as what we see the pineal gland. So he is actually describing that this area, Kether, which represents the nebula, is a face in profile showing one eye, which is the pineal gland. That is what he's actually telling us here in his audio. Okay, so now we know clearly with what we're dealing with here. We knew we're dealing with the nebula. We know we're dealing with this metaphysical property of the pineal gland. We know that we're dealing scientifically with the area that this pinch exists inside the area of the trapezium stars. Now that we know what we're dealing with these descriptions and so forth from several places, and visualize the electric universe in your head as we continue. So let's listen to what he has to say.
This mysterious Macroprosopus, or the long face, was the clothed God, clothed in creation. God as creation, God as cosmos, as an infinite diversity of universes and solar systems, as made up of a great cluster of stars. The vestments of this being were like the radiant fringe of the Milky Way, and it was surrounded by angels full of eyes, which were the stars.
As you can see, he's describing the Orion Nebula just perfectly. Surrounded by angels full of eyes, which were the stars. His vestments were like the radiant fringe of the Milky Way, because we see that spiraling out of the Orion Nebula and the Orion constellation, we have the one leg that looks just like a leg that we would look at if we looked at the Milky Way. So he is describing the Orion Nebula in high detail here.
And its vehicle was the Merkava of Ezekiel, the chariot of righteousness.
And in our previous video, we showed that the chariot of righteousness, the Merkava of Ezekiel, is actually the brain, and that's exactly what the Orion Nebula is and what he's describing.
And in the midst of this great machinery of the universe sat the Ancient of the Most Ancients, the power at the root of all things, unchangeable and in its own visage unknowable.
Okay, so what he's done for us there is he's described this same thing. And now we're going to take a look at some texts inside the Kabbalah I was just showing you. And we're going to take a look at some things that regarding this area. When you see the macroprosopis, you need to think of it as the Orion Nebula Trapezium area. And I want you to notice some of the terms that are used here. We have the Ancient One, which is also the macroprosopis, especially concerning his skull, concerning the dew or moisture of the brain of the Ancient One, or macroprosopis. You see how it's all being described? It's all coming together. Further, concerning the skull of the macroprosopis, the membrane of the brain of the macroprosopis, the hair of the macroprosopis. Now that's something that I think that Manly Hall was also mentioning we need to listen to.
We now have Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Air, revealed through the great face with its threefold forked beard. The hairs of the beard being the streamers of energy moving from the three powers of the deity. This macroprosopis, or the long face, rises above the horizon of infinites, like a sun.
So as you can see, he's describing this thing to a T. So the hair is actually being referred to as the streamers of energy. Now, without getting into the esoteric part of here, there is something that I will leave a link to this main page right here. But as you read through this, you will find that what is being described to us is that this area, which supplies this cosmic electricity to our solar system and all of this other stuff, there is also a particular connection it's referring to that refers to its connection to us specifically. And that's going to get into the esoteric. We're not going to go there right now. Let's just take a look at some of the scientific parts. So I'm going to go through some of these things, and I'm going to read some of the things out of it for you, and just visualize the electric universe, this area that's considered Kether, which is this triangular area surrounding an eye, which is the Eye of Osiris, which is this Kether, this pineal gland of this cosmos that we're in, this solar world system that we're in. This is the area, which is the pineal gland. Okay, and so just think about this. The lightning comes from this area and lights all the worlds below it that it's created. Okay, this is from the concerning the Ancient One, or macroprosopis, or concerning his parts, especially concerning his skull. If I come down here, it says, white are his garments, and his appearance is likeness of a face. Like his appearance is the likeness of a face, vast and terrible. Upon the throne of flaming light he is seated, so that he may direct its flashes. And that is very indicative of what we would see if we were thinking of the electric universe, this area producing flashes or lightning. Now this is concerning the dew or moisture of the brain of the Ancient One. And it says, and from that skull distilleth a dew upon him, which is external, and filleth his head daily. And from that dew which floweth down from his head, namely that which is external, the dead are raised up in the world to come. So there's something about the electricity of this area that affects us down here, but that's getting into the esoteric stuff. And it says the dew of the lights. Now the dew, when I think of the dew in the electric universe there, I think of this area surrounding the trapezium of the Orion Nebula. It's causing this area, this pinch, to brighten everything and cause a dew. It says the dew of the lights is thy dew, because this area supplies the cosmic electricity to the solar system, everything below it, and apparently it supplies it to us as well. Of the lights, that is, from the brightness of the Ancient One, and by that dew are nourished the holy supernal ones. And this is that manna which is prepared for the just in the world to come. So that's really interesting stuff when we get into the esoteric part of this. Now this section has a very interesting thing I wanted to read for you. It's concerning the hair. Remember, the hair are the streamers of energy coming from this place. From the skull of his head hang down 1,000 myriads, 7,500 curling hairs, white and pure like as wool when it is pure, which have not been mingled confusedly together in inordinate disorder, should be shown in his conformation. down here it says, and he radiateth in 720 directions. Now, if you're familiar with sacred geometry, I want to show you something really interesting. So this right here that you're looking at, this is this tetrahedron that Klaus Dona found. That's antediluvian, and it contains information on the bottom written in pre-Sanskrit that was looked at by somebody that knows over 40 languages, some German guy. It says the Son of the Creator comes, and it has an image of the Orion constellation on the bottom of it. You can go check it out on some of his stuff. If you notice this eye that sits here at the top, this eye is the same thing as what we see in the Orion Nebula Trapezium. It says the Son of the Creator comes. But here's the interesting thing. Because we take a look right here, it says it radiateth in 720 directions. Well, the tetrahedron has a number of surface angles on it that total 720. And if you're familiar with sacred geometry, you know this. The cube, I believe, has a certain, I can't remember the number that it has, but they all have these number of surface angles. If you add all the angles up in all these various angles, you get a total number, and the tetrahedron is actually 720. And I believe that's what's being referred to here. And this is interesting because it says there is no left in that ancient concealed one, but all is right. And we have a little link that we can go to here. And what it's showing us is there, meaning there is no evil in him, but all is good. So that in the symbolic language of the Zohar, the macroprosopis is represented by a profile countenance, so his face being in profile, wherein one side is not seen, rather than by a full face, as in the macroprosopis. But as we can see, it actually is a profile, and it is facing to the right. All is right, and that's exactly what we see when we take a look at the Orion Nebula. It is a profile facing to the right. Now, this type of terminology is used in several places in this Kabbalah text, but it's saying in the parting of the hair. Now, remember, the hair is the streamers of energy, the fohat, preceding a certain path. Now, that's lightning. When you think of lightning, lightning forms paths, which shineth into 270 worlds, and from that again shineth a path, wherein just of the world to come shall shine. So there's terminology showing that it's this shining, or these energy streams from this area, and it lights all these other worlds along the path that it goes. And this is exactly what we see when we take a look at the electric universe. We can see that, for example, our sun is powered by these Birkeland currents that exist from some other area in the arm of our galaxy, and we know where that area is now. Now, this is concerning the eyes of the macroprosopis, and that is the eye that we actually see inside there, the Orion Nebula, which is the area of the triangle, which represents Kether, the pineal gland, as we can see, right? So this is the eyes of the macroprosopis here. And it says the eyes of the white head, which is considered microprosopis, are diverse from all other eyes. Above the eye is no eyelid, neither is there an eyebrow over it. And it speaks of, behold, he that keepeth Israel, which means, Israel really means one who lives by the good, the nature of the good, or the God, or it doesn't have anything to do with the country Israel. It's a certain way of thinking. It's a consciousness type of thing. So it's people, the way that people live, or this type of thing. It's it has to do with you. It doesn't have anything to do with the country. And so it says, behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. So this area, I believe, what it actually does when it's speaking of the esoteric in relationship to us, when we think of us as a smaller circuit, which is the same as what we see on a cosmos level, this Kabbalah tree of life can also be looked at as a circuit, where we have this area right up here, sending electricity down, and it coming back up again. So what I see here when I see stuff like that is that this area, depending on how our circuit is operating on on our level. That this area actually up here connects to our individual circuits. And by doing that, it causes something to happen within inside us. Maybe it opens our eyes or something like that. Something to think about anyway. It says right here, the first whiteness shineth and ascendeth, for the purpose of combining with that which is connected with it in connection. So it's almost speaking as though like these like the lower circuits connect to the higher circuit, depending on how we are dealing with our own circuits, if that makes any sense. And it says, the third whiteness radiateth and shineth and descendeth and ascendeth and goeth forth from the part enclosed in the brain. So think of the Orion Nebula, that it's radiating from that area. And it darteth forth its rays to the seven middle light. And it formeth a path to the inferior brain and a path to the inferior, and all the other inferior lights are thereby ignited. So it's describing this thing esoterically. Again, we can think of it as our solar system, but we can even think of it in more of an inferior level, which would be us, where if the circuits, it would actually form a path to our circuits and connects to us as well. And this is interesting. It says, all is right, there is no left, and we've already taken a look at that. It's the faces in profile. And it also has something to do with the nature of the person, whether it be all good. So all these things you can see, there's something we actually see as far as the cosmos, the form, and it also relates to something that is not related to form, but more of theory and consciousness. You can see there's this melding of the two together. It says, all is right, there is no left there. He sleepeth hot, and slumbereth not, and he requireth not protection, because he's the very top part of the chain here. He defendeth all things, and he himself waited upon all things, and in the sight of his eye all things are established. So it's actually speaking the fact that him supplying the cosmic electricity, all things are established, because it says that were that eye closed for even one moment, no thing could subsist. Which means if the cosmic electricity were not supplied from that area, everything under it that was being supplied this electricity could not subsist. So you can see how the electric universe is actually going into this and working with this. So one more time, we'll just listen without being interrupted what Manly Hall is describing. And now that we already know the definitions of it all, it should make a lot more sense when you think of this as the electric universe. So here we go.
In the Jewish mysticism, the development of the great concept resulted also in a secondary God form. This secondary God form was called Macroprosophos, or the long face. The Macroprosophos represented the revelation of deity in the creation process. And there emerged out of the mystery of infinite being the gigantic figure, like the giant of the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, a mysterious and colossal figure with one foot upon the oceans and the other upon the land, around whose body the stars and planets moved, and whose face was always in profile, because deity was represented always with one eye. This mysterious Macroprosophos, or the long face, was the clothed God, clothed in creation. God as creation, God as cosmos, as an infinite diversity of universes and solar systems, as made up of a great cluster of stars. The vestments of this being were like the radiant fringe of the Milky Way, and it was surrounded by angels full of eyes, which were the stars, and its vehicle was the Merkava of Ezekiel, the chariot of righteousness. And in the midst of this great machinery of the universe sat the ancient of the most ancients, the power at the root of all things, unchangeable, and in its own visage unknowable. We now have Ein, Ein Sof, and Ein Sofer revealed through the great face with its threefold forked beard. The hairs of the beard being the streamers of energy moving from the three powers of the deity. This macroprosophus, or the long face, rises above the horizon of infinites, like a sun rising from darkness. And because this horizon of infinites resembles more than anything else a great ocean, it is represented as a mirror. And as the face rises above, the reflection of the face inverted appears in the ocean beneath. And therefore we have the two great faces, one looking down, one looking up from the shadows below. These two faces therefore represent the aspects of creation.
And so there you go. So I hope you can see now that the description of this particular area and what's referred to in the Kabbalah and what we actually see in the Kabbalah and its diagrams, and in comparison to what we see inside of the stanzas, inside of the secret doctrine, we can see that the truth that is now coming forth here, and we can see the connection. We can see the similarities between man himself and what we actually see in the cosmos. And thanks to Michelangelo and him painting what he did, we can actually see that this area has given us definition and understanding what it actually is in comparison to man himself. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and we'll talk to you soon.